Following their victory in North Africa in May of 1943, the Western Allies turned their attention to the next phase of the war in the Mediterranean, which was to be the invasion of Sicily under the codename of Operation Husky. However, during the planning for Husky, the Allied High Command, led by US General Dwight Eisenhower, became concerned with a small Italian island known as Pantelleria, which is located just off the coast of Tunisia and sat along the path the Allies intended to take during their invasion of Sicily. Measuring only 13 kilometers long and 8 kilometers wide, Pantelleria had been turned into a fortress by the Italian government, with gun emplacements, barracks, observation posts and radar installations scattered throughout the island, whilst an airfield and a harbour served as forward staging points from which the Italian Air Force and Navy could conduct operations. A US military report on Pantelleria adds that it was greatly publicised by the Italians and praised by the Germans as being the Gibraltar of the Mediterranean. It was considered by many as being unassailable. On the island was known to be an airstrip 5,000 feet long and an underground hangar capable of taking 4 engine bombers. The island was known to have been powerfully fortified since 1937. Photographs showed over 100 coastal defence heavy gun positions ranging up to 15-inch guns. Intelligence estimated approximately 10,000 men in the garrison, made up mainly or entirely of Italian personnel. The island was honeycombed with caves, tunnels and cellars. Given the significant threat posed by the island to Operation Husky, General Dwight Eisenhower made the decision to carry out an offensive to occupy Pantelleria. Codenamed Operation Corkscrew, this offensive commenced on the 14th of May 1943, when an air and naval blockade was imposed upon the island. 4 days later, on the 18th, Allied Air Force units began a large-scale bombing campaign against Pantelleria, and over the next 3.5 weeks, over 6,000 tons of bombs will be dropped on the island, with the harbour, airfield and defensive installations constituting the primary targets. In addition, this aerial effort was supplemented by a number of Allied warships, which carried out naval bombardments against the harbour and enemy coastal positions. Meanwhile, in Tunisia, plans were drawn up for an amphibious landing to occupy Pantelleria. Tasked with executing this landing was the infantry of the British 1st Division, which received its orders for Operation Corkscrew at the end of May. Going into early June, the division moved into several concentration areas around the cities of Sfax and Sousse and began to train for the landing, which the 1st Battalion the Duke of Wellington's Regiment and the 1st Battalion the King's Shropshire Light Infantry were selected to lead. The regimental magazine for the Duke of Wellington's recalls, "We did not know it was Pantelleria we were bound for until 2 or 3 days before the operation took place. We knew of course it was to be a combined operation. We knew too the nature of the country we would have to fight over. Many of us made shrewd guesses, but that was all." As soon as the news was revealed, there was considerable excitement at the fort that the Dukes were to be one of the first 2 battalions to land on the Axis metropolitan territory, almost exactly 3 years after being driven out of Europe at Dunkirk. As the 1st Division prepared for its amphibious assault, the air and naval bombardment against Pantelleria steadily intensified, and in the period from the 1st to the 10th of June, some 3,647 aerial sorties were carried out over the island. In that same period, the Allied High Command issued 2 ultimatums to the enemy garrison, demanding that they surrender Pantelleria without a fight. However, when these ultimatums went unanswered, General Dwight Eisenhower authorised the launching of the ground phase of Operation Corkscrew on the 10th of June 1943. That night, the men of the 1st Division left their concentration areas and embarked onto troop ships at Sousse and Sfax. These troop ships then headed out into the Mediterranean Sea, linked up with an escort force of Allied warships, before arriving off the coast of Pantelleria at around 09:55 on the 11th of June. Here, the British infantry witnessed the final phase of the Allied air and naval bombardment against the island, with the Duke of Wellington's regimental magazine continuing. It was an impressive sight to look round and view the whole great convoy moving along in perfect formation, with its escort of cruisers and destroyers steaming ahead and to either flank. But the most impressive of all was when our bombers came over to blast the defences for the last time before we landed. That was a sight that none of us could ever forget. Wave after wave of heavy bombers, all keeping perfect formation, seemed to stretch back as far as the eye could see, They came steadily on, passing right over our heads and making a beeline for the harbour area. As we watched, we could clearly see the first bombs falling from the planes, and then, after a breathtaking pause, came the first sickening thuds as they found their mark. At approximately 10:30, the infantry of the 1st King Shropshire and the 1st Duke of Wellingtons transferred onto their landing craft and headed for the shoreline. An hour and a half later, at exactly 1200 and under the cover of naval fire, the first wave touched down on their designated landing points, which were a set of beaches and piers in Pantelleria harbour. Rushing out from their landing craft, the assaulting troops quickly secured their first objectives and dealt with a handful of Italian snipers and machine gun nests that opposed the landing. By 1220, both the Wellingtons and the Shropshires were complete ashore and seized control over the town of Pantelleria. At that point, the follow-up unit, the 2nd Battalion, the Sherwood Foresters, was ordered forward to reinforce the beachhead. However, before the Foresters could deploy, the Allied High Command received a message from Admiral Gino Pavesi, the Italian commander for Pantelleria, which stated that the island was running short on water and that he wished to surrender to the Allied forces. At around the same time, the Wellingtons and the Shropshires reported that a number of white flags could be seen opposite their positions, as the Wellingtons magazine reports. As we reached our appointed positions clear of the town, and now as we looked towards the great peaks that towered up behind it, a host of white flags seemed suddenly to have sprung up. Everywhere, little bands of enemy soldiers, each seemingly armed with his own token of surrender, were making their way down towards us. Following the news of the Italian surrender on Pantelleria, Major General Walter Clutterbuck, the commander of the 1st Division, went ashore at 13:30 to meet with and accept the surrender of Admiral Gino Pavesi. After a 3-hour wait, the two commanders met in the island's underground hangar, and it was here at 17:35 on the 11th of June 1943 that Admiral Pavesi formally signed the document of surrender. In the days that followed, the 1st Division took over responsibility for the administration of Pantelleria, during which it oversaw the evacuation of up to 16,000 German and Italian prisoners of war. Eventually, on the 17th of June, the division was relieved of this responsibility by the American 9th Air Force and was withdrawn from the island. The 1st Division then returned to Tunisia, where it enjoyed a brief moment of rest, before it began to prepare for its role in the Allied invasion of mainland Italy. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe so that you never miss one of my future videos.